Okay, well, welcome back. Now we are going to pick it up where we left off in the previous video, and I'm presenting my summary of a book by William Chittick, and we are now halfway through chapter 3, beginning on page 44, and here I am paraphrasing under the heading, The Intellectual Tradition. Traditional Islamic thought is about intellectual, not transmitted learning on the subjects of metaphysics, cosmology, spiritual psychology, and ethics, with the goal of the return of the soul to God. The purpose of intellectual studies was to prepare the ground for achieving human perfection. To use the expression that was made famous by Arabi, the goal of human life is to achieve the status of a perfect human being. So there are two types of thought: imitation of past scholars or experts in choosing one's opinion, and the second way of thinking is to understand truth, rightness, and the appropriateness of things, and also to respond to them correctly by putting them into practice. And understanding of this type is intensely personal. And to avoid falling into illusion, one must be constantly engaged in the process of reorientation of one's thinking, keeping it in a state of tawhid. Okay. So then it goes on in page 47. The prevailing modern worldview is called scientism. And this is the belief that the scientific method and scientific findings are the sole criteria for truth. And it simply assumes that the universe, as described by science, is the real universe. In contrast, traditional Islamic intellectuals pursued wisdom, which means right thought and right activity, both intellectual perfection and moral perfection, which is the quest to achieve unity with the divine light or divine spirit. And Chittick says that God is wise and God is not a scientist. So Chittick states that modern scientists long ago abandoned any claim that science can help people find the road to right activity, not to mention moral perfection. The role of science is to simply provide more power over God's creation. Science does not and cannot address the issue of understanding the true nature of the universe, because the true nature of the universe cannot be understood without reference to the transcendent, intelligent, unseen principles that govern the universe. Nor can science address the issue of how we are to find the wisdom to employ correctly the power that we gain over creation. Traditional Islamic thought always maintained the principle that everything is interconnected, the soul and the cosmos are complementary existences, whereas modern science views the universe as something that doesn't include humanity as an integral and essential element. According to science, the world works without us. Okay, so traditional Islamic thinking divided reality into two, sort of realms. One they call tawhid, and the other is ch.3. So tawhid represents unity, and ch.3 speaks about the multiplicity that we see in creation. And it is through the human principle that the many is unified. Okay, there's a certain philosopher named Kashani, and he says that the universal intellect is God's primary servant in creation, which is to say that the cosmos in all its multiplicity appears from unity on the basis of the radiance of the divine intellect or divine omniscience. In contrast, human beings are God's servant in the return, and this is to say that we are able to partake in the multiplicity and unify it, which reconnects it to the ultimate reality. Here's a quote from page 54. The Islamic worldview might be characterized as multiplicity in the service of unity. In contrast, the scientific worldview can be characterized as multiplicity without unity. And this can be clearly seen in the fruit of modern learning. Take, for example, the ever more specialized nature of the scientific, social, and humanistic disciplines. The disintegration of any coherent vision of human nature in the modern university, and the unintelligibility of the individual sciences to any but experts, and the total incomprehensibility of the edifice of science as a whole. When multiplicity rules over human thought, the result can only be analysis, differentiation, disunity, disharmony, disequilibrium, and dissolution. Given that modern science and learning are rooted in the world's multiplicity, not in God's unity, the fruit is division and dispersion without end, not unification and harmony. The scientific worldview makes no acknowledgments of the principles of ethics and morality whatsoever, because these are of the realm which is transcendent to its scope of concern. So ethics and morality are on a completely different realm, a different level than where science is operating. Okay, the goal of thought. There is a fundamental difference between Islamic intellectual tradition and modern living. One way to understand this is to see that Muslim intellectuals were striving to achieve a unity and unified vision of all things by actualizing the transpersonal intellect, the divine spirit latent in the human soul. In contrast, modern scientists want to achieve an ever more exact and precise understanding of things, one that allows increased control over the environment, the body, and society. So he mentions the transpersonal intellect. So he also mentioned earlier that the divine presence was basically intellectual, and it's a sort of an atmosphere of light, and it's pervasive in creation. So that's what's called the transpersonal intellect, the collective consciousness, which is founded in the divine presence in creation. Various forms of government have appeared in the modern world, all of which take advantage of scientific, technological, and bureaucratic power to instill docility in their subjects. Another characteristic of the Islamic intellectual tradition that places it in stark contrast with modern learning is the intensely personal nature of the quest. Every seeker of wisdom had to learn metaphysics and cosmology for him or herself. Actualizing wisdom can only be achieved in realization, which is awakened intelligence and ethical activity. The goal is to discover truth for oneself. No one can achieve true and real understanding until he stops imitating others and finds out for himself. So that's the end of chapter 4. So I'm going to pause for a minute and see if we're going to add more to this particular video.